You have mistaken composure for healing. Most people have. It is an easy mistake to make because composure looks like peace. It sounds like peace. It holds its voice steady. It doesn't flinch in meetings. It doesn't cry in cars, or at least, not where anyone can see. But there is a version of calm that is built not on clarity, but on pressure. A pressure so constant, so familiar, that you stopped noticing it years ago. The Stoics are often blamed for this. Marcus Aurelius in particular, the man who ruled an empire and wrote about equanimity in a private journal he never intended for anyone to read. His words have been passed around as a kind of emotional instruction manual. Don't be disturbed, don't be moved, don't let it in. But that is not what he wrote. What he wrote was quieter than that, and more demanding, and significantly more honest about the cost of doing it wrong. There is a difference between a person who has made peace with something difficult and a person who has simply learned not to mention it. From the outside, they can look identical, but they do not feel identical. And one of them is slowly paying a price that doesn't appear on any visible ledger. This episode is about that difference. They were known as the steady one. At work, in the family, among friends, when things got difficult, people turned to them. Not because they had all the answers, but because they didn't seem rattled. Crises passed through them like light through glass. Or at least, that's what it appeared to be. For a long time, they believed it themselves. When a colleague said something dismissive in a meeting, something that landed in the chest like a small stone, they nodded, moved on, told themselves it didn't matter. I'm above that. And in the next breath, they believed it. When a close friend canceled on them for the 4th time, not with cruelty, just with the particular carelessness of someone who assumes you'll always be fine, they said nothing. They genuinely thought saying nothing was the higher road. Mature, controlled, stoic even. They slept fine, performed well, were described by others as grounded. But something was accumulating. Not anger, exactly. Not sadness, exactly. Something more like distance. A growing sense that they were watching their own life from a few feet back. Present enough to function. Not quite present enough to feel. They told themselves this was what it meant to be evolved, to be past the noise of ordinary reactivity, to have finally mastered themselves. The question that hadn't fully surfaced yet, the one they weren't ready for, was this: had they mastered their emotions, or had they simply lost contact with them? Here is the distortion that lives inside a certain kind of self-control. It begins as discipline, something genuinely admirable, the refusal to be swept away by every passing feeling, every provocative moment, the ability to pause, to choose a response rather than simply react. There is real value in that. It is worth developing. Nobody is arguing against it. But discipline, practiced without awareness, can quietly become avoidance. And avoidance, practiced long enough, begins to feel like strength. That is the turn, where something that started as genuine development slowly hollows itself out from the inside. The mind is very good at generating stories that make the present arrangement feel virtuous. I don't complain because I've risen above it. I don't get upset because I understand people aren't perfect. I don't express what I need because I've learned not to be attached to outcomes. Each of those statements can be true. Each of them can also be a cover story. The surface of both looks exactly the same. That's what makes it difficult. You cannot tell by looking at the sentence whether it is wisdom or self-protection. You can only tell by tracing what it costs and what it quietly preserves. The difficult thing, the thing Marcus Aurelius was actually grappling with in those private pages, is that the mind cannot always distinguish the two from the inside, not without effort, not without a kind of deliberate, unflinching attention that most people would rather avoid. He wrote about returning to himself again and again, not because he was enlightened, but because he kept drifting. He kept catching himself performing reason while feeling something underneath that he hadn't yet named. The meditations are not a record of mastery. They are a record of someone noticing, repeatedly, that mastery had not arrived, and continuing anyway. That is the detail that gets lost in how Stoicism is usually presented. The discipline he practiced was not the discipline of feeling nothing. It was the discipline of looking honestly at what was actually happening inside, including the parts that were uncomfortable, inconvenient, or unflattering to acknowledge. That is a much harder practice than the version that gets quoted on linen-colored Instagram accounts. So, here's the question that lives underneath what looks like composure. What if the calm you've constructed is not resolution, but a ceiling you've placed over yourself? What if the peace you describe to others is not something you arrived at, but something you retreated into, because arriving felt too costly? Those two things can feel identical for a long time, until they don't. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." It is one of his most repeated lines, and it is almost always misread. People hear, "Control your reactions. Don't let things affect you," and they take that as permission, even as instruction, to disconnect from the feeling itself, to skip it, to move through the day as if the feeling were a distraction rather than information. But that's not where Aurelius located the work. The Stoics had a specific term for the initial moment of experience, the phantasia, the impression that arrives before any judgment is applied, the flash of anger when someone dismisses you, the sting when someone you trusted lets you down, the tightening in the chest when you realize something you wanted isn't going to happen. These were not, in Stoic thought, the problem. They were acknowledged as involuntary. They happen. They are part of being a body, a social creature, a person who has something to lose. The Stoics were not interested in eliminating them. What the Stoics were interested in was what comes next. The synchetathesis, the ascent. The moment when you take the impression and decide what it means, what it demands, how much of yourself it gets to organize around. That is where the work lives, in the space between the impression and the response. But here's what rarely gets said. That space cannot be created by denial. It cannot be created by pretending the impression didn't land, or that it was beneath you, or that you are past the kind of person who would feel that. The space between feeling and reaction can only be created by first acknowledging, honestly, clearly, without performance, what you are actually experiencing. You have to go through it to find the gap, not around it. This is where the philosophy becomes genuinely demanding in a way people don't expect when they first encounter it. Because to locate the space between feeling and reaction, you have to admit the feeling exists. You have to sit with it long enough to know what it actually is, not what you wish it were, not the more dignified version you'd prefer to have arrived at by now. Aurelius himself wrote about the feeling of anger before he wrote about transcending it. He named the thing first. He didn't skip to the resolution, so consider this. When something difficult happens, not the dramatic things, but the quiet daily things, the small frictions and disappointments that don't feel worth mentioning, do you actually stop and observe what arises? Do you look at it honestly, the way you would look at anything you're trying to understand? Or do you skip straight to the management of it? Is your equanimity a practice you return to after feeling, or a shortcut you take instead of it? The answer to that question may be more revealing than anything else in this episode. There is often something underneath the composure that doesn't like to be looked at directly. For many people who take pride in emotional control, and the pride itself is worth noticing, what drives that control is not philosophical sophistication. It is a quieter fear. One that predates the philosophy, and found the philosophy useful as a container. The fear is this, that if the feeling is acknowledged, even privately, even alone, even in the dark with no one watching, it will become real in a way that demands something. It will have to be addressed. It will have to be named out loud to someone, eventually. It will require action, or change, or a conversation that carries real risk, or the admission, the deeply uncomfortable admission, that something in your life is not working the way you have been. Telling yourself it is. Suppression is easier. It asks nothing of you. It lets you keep the arrangement intact. And Stoicism, misread, becomes the most socially respectable container for suppression that exists. It comes with philosophical credibility. It references ancient emperors. It signals maturity and perspective. It sounds exactly like wisdom rather than avoidance, which is precisely what makes it so difficult to question in yourself. Aurelius was aware of this trap. The shape of it runs through the Meditations like a thread. He returned to the same themes repeatedly: patience, honesty with oneself, the danger of self-flattery, not because he had mastered them, but because he kept discovering new ways he was deceiving himself. New angles from which self-deception arrived dressed as virtue. The project required continual, uncomfortable honesty. He never declared himself done. The hidden motivation, then, is this. The identity of someone who has their emotions under control is an extremely comfortable identity to inhabit and protect. Because it means you never have to be the one who is struggling, never the one who needs something, Never the one who admits that something hurt, or landed wrong, or left a mark that hasn't fully healed. The composed person is the one others lean on. The composed person is the one who holds things together. That role carries real meaning, real social value, real confirmation that you are someone who has figured something out. But it is a role. And roles, when they are confused with identity, begin to manage the person rather than serve them. This is not strength. It is a persona that has learned to survive by going unexamined. And the distance between who you are performing and who you actually are, that distance doesn't stay static. It grows, quietly and consistently, the way a crack in a foundation grows. Not dramatic, just persistent. And what it crowds out, slowly and without announcement, is the very thing that makes genuine connection, genuine presence, and genuine calm possible. Not the performance of those things, the actual experience of them. Here is something worth sitting with. The person who never seems rattled is often not describing their experience of life. They are describing their management of it, and at a certain point, it can take years before this becomes fully visible, and some people never reach it. Managing your experience and actually having your experience are not the same thing. One is exhausting in a way that doesn't appear anywhere measurable. The other is simply what it feels like to be alive in your own life. When Stoicism is understood correctly, not the version that circulates online, not the productivity-adjacent version that promises to make you unaffected, and therefore more effective, what it actually invites is full presence to what is real, including what is difficult, including what is unresolved, including the emotions that don't behave according to the image you've been working to project. The discipline is not in making yourself feel less. It is in refusing to be governed by feeling while still letting it be true. That distinction sounds subtle when stated plainly. It is not subtle in practice. The gap between those two things, lived out over years, is enormous, because most people who believe they are practicing emotional mastery, who genuinely believe they have achieved something real, are often practicing something that looks identical from the outside, but operates from a completely different mechanism on the inside. They are refusing to feel, rather than refusing to be controlled by feeling. The outcome looks similar. The interior experience is entirely different, and the long-term cost is entirely different. The self-image of the steady, composed, emotionally grounded person is not itself the problem. There is nothing wrong with that aspiration. The problem is when that image becomes more important to protect than the actual interior life it was supposed to represent. When maintaining the appearance of having worked through something takes precedence over actually working through it. Marcus Aurelius, in the Meditations, was not maintaining an image. He was actively dismantling one, repeatedly. That is what those pages are, a private record of someone catching themselves in the performance and choosing to look beneath it. So consider this. Who would you be if you allowed yourself to know what you were actually feeling before you decided what to do about it? Before you assessed whether it was appropriate or proportionate or consistent with the person you've worked to become? Not who would you present, not how would you appear. Who would you be? There is no instruction here. That is intentional. What Aurelius actually offers, what the Meditations offer when read in full rather than mined for quotable lines, is not a system for achieving a particular emotional state. It is an account of a person trying repeatedly to see himself clearly, failing in specific ways, noticing the failure, trying again from a different angle, not arriving anywhere final, not declaring himself resolved. The practice, as he lived it, was the returning, not the arriving. The composure that comes from genuinely moving through something, from sitting with it, from naming it honestly, from letting it inform you before you decide what it means, feels different from the composure that comes from sealing something off. Both can look identical from the outside. Both can feel identical to the person who inhabits them, for a while. But one has air in it. One leaves room for something to shift, for understanding to arrive gradually, for the interior to move. The other maintains its form by preventing anything from moving at all. There is a kind of stillness that is alive, and there is a kind of stillness that is frozen. You may already sense which one you've been living in, or the question may be less clear than you'd like, which is its own form of honesty. Either way, Aurelius would not have told you what to do with that. He would have written it down in a private journal, returned to it the next morning, and started again. Both are honest places to be. The practice is in staying with the question rather than reaching for an answer that closes it too quickly. Marcus Aurelius didn't write the meditations because he had mastered himself. He wrote them because he hadn't, and he refused to pretend otherwise. The real Stoic practice is not the stillness you perform. It's the honesty you return to when no one is watching. Equanimity, when it is real, costs something. Not in the sense of suffering for it, but in the sense that it requires you to actually move through things rather than around them. To let impressions land and then only then choose what to do with them. That is slower. It is less elegant than the image of someone who simply doesn't get disturbed. But it is more honest, and over time, it leaves less behind. There is a kind of calm that is arrived at, and there is a kind of calm that is constructed to keep something out. You don't have to know, right now, which one you've been living, but it is worth asking whether the stillness you've built is something you can breathe inside, or something you've had to hold very carefully in place.